The night Sebastian confessed he wanted my sister Lyra instead of me, I thought my entire life was over. I never imagined that betrayal would be the spark that pushed me to reinvent myself completely, and to discover a strength I didn't know I had. For years, I told myself that I had the kind of marriage that other women envied. Sebastian and I were college sweethearts. He was the charismatic one, confident, witty, able to strike up a conversation with anyone. I was the steady one, organized, focused, driven. People used to joke that together we were unstoppable. His charm and my determination were the perfect match. And I believed it. We rented a cramped one-bedroom apartment downtown after graduation, its paint peeling and heating unreliable, but to me it was more than four walls. It was proof that Sebastian and I were building a future together. On nights when I dragged myself home from nursing school exhausted and smelling of disinfectant, he'd greet me with his half-burned eggs or cheap takeout, grinning like it was a feast. He'd say, "One day, Marissa, this will all be worth it. One day, we'll look back and laugh about how broke we were." I clung to those words. But Lyra, my younger sister, was always in the picture. She was everything I wasn't, effortlessly magnetic, tall and striking, with a social media following that only amplified her glow. She had carved out a career as a fitness influencer, posing on bright yoga mats and posting daily routines that thousands of strangers adored. My parents worshipped her achievements, bragging about her brand and influence, while my nursing degree earned little more than polite nods. I told myself we weren't in competition. She had her world, I had mine. And Sebastian, well, Sebastian was mine. At least, that's what I thought. Lyra visited often. She'd lounge across our couch in designer leggings, hair in effortless waves, laughing at Sebastian's jokes in a way that made her whole body lean toward him. He'd grin back, that easy boyish grin that once was only for me. I tried not to notice. I told myself, he's just being nice. She's family. But there were signs, quiet, insidious. Midnight text alerts lighting up his phone with her name. His quick explanations, she needed help with a campaign thing. The way he always happened, to like and comment on her photos while barely acknowledging mine. Compliments that once belonged to me, "You look amazing, babe," now seemed reserved for her. Still, I held on. I thought things would settle once we built the family we'd always talked about. I wanted to be a mother more than anything, and I believed a baby would bring us closer, grounding Sebastian the way our vows once had. So I started IVF treatments. The injections left bruises across my thighs, my belly sore and tender. Each appointment drained our savings and tested my resolve. But I told myself this was proof of my commitment, of my willingness to fight for us. Every needle was a promise. I will not give up on this marriage. And then, finally, it worked. The test turned positive. I held it in my hands, crying and laughing all at once. The doctor confirmed it. I was pregnant. I rushed to buy a tiny pair of baby shoes, nestled them in a gift box, and wrapped it in silver paper. I imagined the look on Sebastian's face when he opened it on his birthday, the way his arms would wrap around me, his eyes bright with the promise of the future we had struggled so hard to reach. But before that day came, the foundation of my world crumbled. One night, as we sat on the couch with the TV flickering, Sebastian shifted uncomfortably. He had been restless for weeks, sighing, avoiding my eyes, tension radiating off him like heat. Finally, he turned toward me, face pale but resolute. "I can't keep lying to myself, Marissa," he said. My chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" He took a breath, as if bracing himself. "It's Lyra. She's the one I really want." For a second, I couldn't process the words. The room tilted. My ears roared. "Say that again," I whispered, clinging to the hope that I had misheard. But Sebastian's gaze was steady, almost relieved. "I want Lyra." Somewhere in the closet, the gift box with the baby shoes sat waiting, hidden under sweaters. A secret celebration for a future that had just been shattered. That was the night the illusion broke. The night I realized the life I had been clinging to was already ashes. And the nightmare was only beginning. After Sebastian's confession, the world around me didn't collapse all at once. It cracked slowly, piece by piece, as if daring me to see how far it would break before I admitted the truth. At first, I told myself it was a moment of weakness. Maybe he had said it out of anger, or exhaustion, or confusion. People made mistakes. Marriages went through storms. If I held on tightly enough, maybe this was still salvageable. Maybe love was stronger than betrayal. But the signs that had once whispered now screamed. Sebastian grew more distant by the day. He spent hours scrolling through his phone, his lips curling into a smile whenever Lyra's name appeared on the screen. I'd sit across from him at the dinner table, food cooling on my plate, watching as his attention was consumed by someone else, someone who shared my blood. When I asked what he was doing, he'd shrug, annoyed, as if I were prying. "It's just Lyra. She needed advice." Advice. That word became a blade, cutting deeper each time it left his mouth. I wanted to confront her, but Lyra had a way of disarming me. She'd drop by with her perfect hair and glowing skin, arms full of protein shakes or new sneakers she wanted to show off, and say, "Marissa, you look so tired, you need to take care of yourself." It was said sweetly, like concern, but her eyes flicked toward Sebastian every time, seeking his reaction. And he'd chuckle, agreeing, "Yeah, she's been pushing herself too hard." They made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. The first warning bell that something irreversible was happening came at a family dinner. My parents had invited us over, one of those obligatory gatherings where Lyra was always the star. I arrived in a new dress, hair carefully curled, makeup subtle but polished. I wanted them to see me, not the tired nurse, not the overlooked sister, but the woman who was building a family, a future. But as soon as we walked in, the attention shifted. Lyra was already there, glowing in a white sundress that looked effortless and expensive. She and Sebastian sat side by side on the couch, laughing at some private joke. My mother's eyes sparkled as she watched them, pride radiating from her face. When we sat down to eat, Dad raised a toast to family, to strength, and to Lyra's amazing achievements. He barely mentioned my pregnancy, even though I had told them just a week earlier. I had expected tears, hugs, congratulations. Instead, Mom said flatly, "That's good news, Marissa. But don't overexert yourself. Sebastian will need someone steady." Then she turned the conversation back to Lyra's growing follower count and her latest sponsorship. Sebastian sat there, nodding along, more animated than I'd seen him in months. Every word out of Lyra's mouth made him grin. I wanted to scream, "Look at me. I'm carrying your child. I'm your wife." But the words died in my throat. The second bell rang a few days later, louder, sharper. I had come home early from a shift, exhausted but eager to surprise Sebastian with dinner. The apartment was quiet when I opened the door, but as I stepped inside, I heard laughter, the unmistakable sound of Lyra's voice. My chest tightened as I followed it into the living room. There they were. Lyra perched on the couch, Sebastian sitting close beside her, their heads bent together over her phone. His hand brushed hers casually, too casually, as if it had happened many times before. When they noticed me, Lyra jumped up with exaggerated cheer. "Marissa, you're home early." She hugged me quickly, her perfume clinging to my shirt. Sebastian mumbled something about helping her brainstorm fitness content. I stood there, holding my bag, my pulse pounding in my ears. The dinner I'd planned suddenly felt meaningless. The home I had built no longer felt like mine. That night, when I confronted Sebastian, he snapped. "You're paranoid. Do you want me to cut off my relationship with your sister just because you're insecure? She's part of the family, Marissa. You need to stop imagining things." His words stung more than I admitted. Insecurity. That was how he framed it. My problem, my weakness. And I hated that part of me almost believed him. The third warning bell didn't just ring, it shattered. 2 weeks later, Sebastian didn't come home. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. I paced the floor, checking my phone, calling him again and again. No answer. When the door finally opened at nearly 3 in the morning, he stumbled in, hair disheveled, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. "Where were you?" My voice trembled, my arms instinctively wrapping around my belly. He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. "Out. With friends." "What friends? Why does it matter?" I wanted to scream, to demand the truth. But exhaustion swallowed me whole, and fear silenced me. The next morning, I got a text, from Lyra. "Thanks for covering for me last night. You're the best." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, the letters blurring, my stomach twisting. Covering? For what? When I showed Sebastian, he smirked coldly. "You're reading into things again. God, Marissa, you're suffocating me." That was the moment I realized something devastating. It wasn't just that he wanted her. It was that he didn't want me. And suddenly, the baby growing inside me felt like the only tether keeping me from vanishing completely. The weeks that followed felt like walking through quicksand. Every movement, every word, every attempt to hold onto my life only seemed to drag me deeper into the pit Sebastian and Lyra had created. What had once been small slights grew into open hostility. And the worst part? No one seemed to see it but me. At first, I tried to keep things normal. I kept cooking dinner, folding Sebastian's laundry, and preparing for the baby like nothing had changed. But my attempts were met with indifference. He barely looked at me anymore, his gaze constantly drawn to his phone, where I knew Lyra's name was always glowing. One morning, I found him in the kitchen, laughing at something on his screen. "What's so funny?" I asked, desperate for a piece of the int asterisk Macy we once shared. "Nothing you'd get," he replied flatly, sliding the phone into his pocket. The wall between us was no longer invisible. It was solid, impenetrable. The isolation worsened when my parents got involved. I had assumed, naively, that when they learned what Sebastian had said, they would be furious, protective, outraged on my behalf. Instead, when I finally broke down and told them, their reaction gutted me. Mom pursed her lips. "Marissa, maybe you're overreacting. You've always been sensitive. Sebastian is under stress, and Lyra, well, she's just friendly." "Friendly?" My voice cracked. "He told me he wants her. He said it outright." Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. "Marissa, you can't just throw away a marriage over one comment. You're pregnant. Think about the child. My child. My child who was already being used as a reason for me to stay silent, to endure." The betrayal wasn't just from Sebastian anymore. It was from my own blood, the family that was supposed to protect me. Lyra, of course, played the role of innocent bystander perfectly. She'd text me little check-ins. "How's the baby? Are you eating enough?" She'd bring smoothies to the apartment, cooing about how excited she was to be an aunt. And all the while, I'd catch the flicker of triumph in her eyes whenever Sebastian was near. The pressure mounted with every interaction. At family gatherings, my parents seemed to favor Lyra more openly than ever. They'd beam as she shared stories of brand deals and gym sponsorships, while barely glancing at my growing belly. "Lyra has such drive," Mom would gush. "She's building something big for herself." Then she'd turn to me with a half smile. "You should take notes from your sister." Take notes. As if my swollen feet, my aching back, the hours I worked at the hospital to keep us afloat meant nothing. As if I were already invisible. Sebastian took their side effortlessly. When I tried to voice my discomfort, he'd cut me down. "You're too emotional, Marissa. Hormones. You need to calm down." Hormones. That became his favorite excuse. Any anger, any fear, any attempt to stand up for myself was dismissed as nothing more than pregnancy hysteria. The real breaking point came one evening when I found Lyra's sweater draped across our couch. I recognized it instantly. It was a brand new designer piece she had posted online just the day before. My hands trembled as I held it up. "Why is this here?" I asked Sebastian when he walked through the door. He didn't even blink. "She stopped by." "When?" "I was here all day." He shrugged, cold and dismissive. "You must not have noticed." The gaslighting was so blatant it made my head spin. I knew I hadn't left the apartment. I knew Lyra hadn't come while I was home. But Sebastian said it with such conviction that for a moment, I questioned myself. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, one hand on my belly. For the first time, I whispered to the tiny life inside me, "I don't know if we're safe here." The isolation grew suffocating. My friends stopped checking in. Sebastian had told them I needed space. My coworkers only saw the surface, a tired pregnant woman with a distracted husband. No one knew the storm beneath. And then came the cruelest blow of all. One Saturday, I walked into my parents' house to find Lyra and Sebastian sitting together at the dining table, papers spread out before them. They looked up guiltily when I entered, but not guiltily enough. "What's going on?" I demanded. Lyra's smile was syrupy sweet. "We're just talking about a potential collaboration. My brand could use some marketing help, and Sebastian's good at that." I stared at the papers, contracts, plans, figures. They weren't just spending time together. They were planning a future. A future that didn't seem to include me. My father walked in at that moment, clapping Sebastian on the shoulder. "Now that's the kind of partnership that makes sense. Strong, ambitious. Maybe it'll rub off on Marissa." Rub off. As if I were some empty vessel waiting to absorb scraps of their brilliance. I felt the walls closing in. My husband wanted my sister. My parents supported them. My sister pretended innocence while basking in their approval. And me. I was just the weak, emotional, inconvenient obstacle standing in their way. I went home that night and locked myself in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. My eyes were sunken, my skin pale, my shoulders slumped. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. And for the first time, I wondered if silence was safer than fighting. If blending into the background was the only way to survive. But deep down, I knew silence wouldn't save me. It would destroy me. And the baby I carried deserved more than a mother who had been erased. By the time my pregnancy reached the second trimester, I had already grown used to the constant knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with morning sickness. The walls of my apartment no longer felt safe, my parents no longer felt like allies, and Sebastian no longer felt like a husband. He and Lyra moved like two halves of a whole, while I trailed behind as if I were the ghost of their conscience. Still, I clung to the hope that things weren't as bad as I feared. That maybe Sebastian's betrayal was confined to emotions, to glances and stolen moments, but hadn't yet crossed into something irreversible. I needed to believe it, for the sake of the child growing inside me. That illusion didn't last long. It happened on an ordinary Thursday. I was leaving the hospital after a long shift, my back aching, my feet swollen, when I saw a familiar car parked near the entrance. Sebastian's car. At first, I smiled faintly, foolishly hopeful that maybe he had come to surprise me, to pick me up, to be the husband I once knew. But when I got closer, my heart stopped. Lyra was in the passenger seat, her hand resting casually on his thigh. They didn't see me at first. They were laughing at something on her phone, their faces inches apart. The int asterisk Macy between them was undeniable, the kind of closeness no innocent friendship could explain. I froze, unable to move, my pulse pounding in my ears. Finally, Sebastian glanced up and saw me standing there. His smile vanished, replaced by something sharp, anger, not guilt. Lyra shifted uncomfortably but didn't pull her hand away. I walked to the car slowly, every step heavy with dread. "What is this?" My voice shook. Sebastian sneered. "Don't do this here, Marissa. Don't embarrass yourself." Embarrass myself. As if his betrayal was my shame to carry. I turned to Lyra. "How could you?" She looked at me with wide, faux innocent eyes. "It's not what it looks like." But it was. We all knew it. That night, Sebastian didn't come home. The next day, the truth began to unravel in ways I couldn't ignore. I went looking for documents in his desk, insurance forms, bills, anything to distract me from the ache in my chest, and instead found a folder labeled Lyra Partnership. Inside were printed contracts, brand proposals, even emails. Sebastian wasn't just helping her with her career. They were planning to launch a fitness studio together, a business that tied their futures together in ways a marriage contract no longer did. But the worst part wasn't the business. It was an email thread between Sebastian and my own mother. "Marissa won't last long at this pace," Mom had written. "She's not built for this. Lyra is the real star. Support them, and you'll go far." Sebastian's reply was casual, almost smug. "Exactly. Once the baby's here, she'll have no time. She'll fade into the background. Lyra and I can handle the spotlight." I sat there staring at the words, my hands trembling, tears blurring the ink. My own mother was rooting for my husband to replace me with my sister. And Sebastian was planning for it as if it were inevitable. The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a full-scale erasure. They weren't content to take my husband. They wanted my identity, my place, my future. 4 days, I moved in a haze. I went to work, came home, ate mechanically, but my mind never stopped racing. At night, I lay awake, my hand on my belly, whispering to my unborn child, I will not let them erase me. I will not let them win. But fear gnawed at me. What power did I have? I was isolated, dismissed as hormonal, cornered by the people who should have loved me most. Then, one evening, as I sorted through Sebastian's laundry, a folded piece of paper slipped out of his jeans pocket. I picked it up, unfolding it carefully. It was a lease agreement. For a new apartment. The tenants listed were Sebastian and Lyra. My knees buckled. I sank to the floor, clutching the paper, struggling to breathe. They weren't just planning a business together. They were planning a life together, one that excluded me entirely. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. I had been silent, patient, hopeful, because I thought that was what love demanded. But love had been twisted into a we*P*N against me. If I didn't act soon, I would lose everything. My marriage, my family, my dignity. And my child would grow up in a world where their mother was nothing but a footnote. That night, as Sebastian slept soundly beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my hand resting protectively over my belly. For the first time, I stopped asking why are they doing this to me, and instead asked, what am I going to do about it? I had spent weeks drowning in betrayal, letting Sebastian and Lyra's choices dictate the rhythm of my days. But after finding that lease agreement, their future home signed and sealed without me, I realized silence was no longer an option. Silence had been there we*P*N. They thrived on my hesitation, my reluctance to fight back. If I wanted to protect myself and my child, I had to become someone new. Someone they wouldn't see coming. The first step was information. Secrets had been their currency, so I started collecting my own. I began by quietly making copies of everything. Sebastian's contracts with Lyra, his email exchanges with my mother, the lease agreement, the business proposals. Every time I slipped a paper into my bag, my hands trembled, but a strange fire spread through me too. For the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving. I was preparing. At work, I confided in a colleague I trusted, Evelyn, a nurse who had been my mentor since residency. She listened without judgment, her lips pressed into a thin line. When I showed her the papers, she whispered, Marissa, this isn't just infidelity. It's a full conspiracy to strip you of everything. Her words confirmed what I already felt. She urged me to speak with a lawyer before confronting Sebastian. You need protection, legally and financially. Don't let him corner you. So, one afternoon, I made an appointment with a family attorney. Sitting in his office, my palms sweaty, I laid out everything. My pregnancy, Sebastian's betrayal, Lyra's involvement, even my mother's complicity. The attorney's brows furrowed deeper with every page he flipped through. You have leverage, he finally said. But you need to play this smart. Do not confront them until we've built a case. Documentation is your ally. If he tries to leave you for your sister, he will face consequences. It was the first time in weeks that I felt a sliver of hope. The second step was reclaiming my body and spirit. Sebastian and Lyra had made me feel like an afterthought, like a fragile shell of myself. But I wasn't fragile. I was carrying life. I was stronger than they could ever imagine. So I started small. Morning walks before work, journaling my fears and my anger, eating properly not just to sustain the baby but to remind myself I deserved care. Each step was a rebellion against the narrative they wanted me to believe, that I was weak, disposable, replaceable. The third step was watching them closely. Sebastian still came home occasionally, usually late at night, his cologne mingling with a faint perfume that wasn't mine. He would collapse into bed without a word, and I would lie there pretending to sleep, listening to the shallow rhythm of his breathing. He thought I was oblivious, but I was memorizing everything. The names he muttered under his breath, the phone calls he took on the balcony, the receipts he carelessly left in his pockets. I even started visiting the gym Lyra had chosen as their test location for her brand. I walked in as just another customer, blending into the background, observing her rehearsed charm with clients. She strutted like she already owned the place, flashing smiles that barely concealed her hunger for validation. I wanted to hate her, but what I felt was something colder, determination. She thought she was untouchable, shielded by Sebastian's devotion and my family's support. But she was building her empire on sand, and I had already started collecting the tide. One evening, while going through Sebastian's laptop, which he foolishly left unlocked, I discovered a hidden folder labeled Future Projections. Inside were financial spreadsheets outlining their planned gym revenue, including my savings account listed as a projected investment. He hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he had already mapped out how to drain me financially. That discovery shifted everything. Until then, I had been hesitant, worried that striking back would make me as cruel as them. But when I saw my hard-earned money, nights of exhaustion, years of study and work, being casually slotted into their dream, rage burned away my hesitation. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about survival. I began strategizing in earnest. The lawyer guided me in setting up a separate bank account under my name only, funneling my paychecks there discreetly. I contacted a real estate agent and began exploring small properties, not for living but for potential business ventures. If Lyra wanted a gym, fine. I would build something better. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman they tried to erase was about to rise stronger than either of them expected. But I wasn't reckless. Every move I made was cloaked in silence. Outwardly, I remained the subdued wife, the tired pregnant woman too distracted to notice what went on around her. I played the role so well that Sebastian stopped hiding as carefully. And then, one night, opportunity presented itself. Sebastian had left his phone unattended on the kitchen counter while taking a shower. My heart hammered in my chest as I picked it up, scrolling quickly. Most of what I found I already knew. Messages with Lyra, plans for their apartment, but then I stumbled across a voice message from my mother. Her voice was calm, almost soothing. Sebastian, don't worry about Marissa. She'll crumble soon enough. Focus on Lyra. She's the future. That was the moment the last thread snapped. My own mother had not just turned against me, she was actively encouraging them to erase me. And instead of breaking me, it crystallized my resolve. They had underestimated me for too long. Now, I wasn't just going to survive their betrayal. I was going to outmaneuver them all. The night I listened to that voice message from my mother was the night something inside me finally clicked into place. The fear, the doubt, the helplessness that had weighed me down for months, they didn't vanish, but they hardened into something sharper. Focus. For weeks, Sebastian and Lyra had played me like a pawn, while my parents looked on, quietly rooting for my collapse. They thought I would cave, too weak to stand up for myself. But they had forgotten one thing. Desperation makes people dangerous. And I was no longer desperate. I was determined. The very next morning, I sat at the kitchen table sipping tea, the pregnancy-safe kind my doctor insisted on, when Sebastian wandered in. He barely acknowledged me, mumbling a distracted morning, before scrolling through his phone. I studied him over the rim of my mug, then said casually, "You left your phone out last night." His head jerked up, eyes narrowing. And nothing, I replied smoothly. I didn't touch it. I just thought, you should be more careful. People might see things you don't want them to. The subtle shift in his posture told me everything. He wasn't sure how much I knew, but the seed of doubt was planted. That was the beginning of my counterplay, no longer reacting, but forcing him to wonder what I might be holding. At work, I leaned on Evelyn Moore, letting her be my quiet sounding board. She introduced me to Zoe, a friend of hers who was a journalist specializing in corruption stories. At first, I hesitated. Airing my family's betrayal in public felt humiliating. But Zoe didn't push. She simply explained how exposure could be power. Secrets lose their strength when the world sees them, she said. I wasn't ready to go public yet. But I tucked that truth away for later. The next move came when Lyra invited me, to her preview event at the gym. It's family only, she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We want you to feel included. Included. The word nearly made me laugh. But I accepted. And I showed up. Walking into that gym was like stepping into an alternate reality. Posters of Lyra, sleek in sportswear, lined the walls. She gave a polished speech about empowerment and ambition, while Sebastian stood beside her like a loyal shadow. My parents beamed from the front row, applauding as if their golden child had just cured cancer. I sat in the back, my hands folded calmly over my belly, observing everything. Every sponsor logo, every name tag, every whispered comment between Sebastian and Lyra. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't there as the humiliated wife. I was there as the witness, the recorder. I took mental snaps *TS of everything, later jotting down every detail in my journal. It wasn't just for me, it was evidence. Proof that they were intertwining their futures while mine was supposed to wither in the shadows. When the event ended, Lyra hugged me, her perfume cloying, her voice too bright. See, Marissa? There's room for everyone. I leaned in just enough to whisper back. Not for long. She pulled away, startled, but I smiled serenely as if I'd said nothing threatening at all. That was the turning point. From then on, I stopped shrinking. I didn't announce my fight. I simply began living differently. I started visiting properties with the real estate agent I had secretly contacted. Small, affordable spaces that could be transformed into something new. Not a gym, but a wellness studio, a place that blended physical health with mental resilience, something Lyra had no concept of. I envisioned mothers, women like me, people cast aside or underestimated, finding strength within those walls. I met quietly with investors, leveraging connections I'd built at the hospital. One in particular, a retired doctor named Harris, listened to my idea with interest. You're not just competing with your sister, he said. You're building something she can't touch. People will rally to authenticity. Each meeting bolstered my confidence. Each step made me less afraid. Sebastian noticed the change, though he didn't understand it. You've been different, he muttered one evening, watching me prepare dinner with an ease I hadn't felt in months. I looked him straight in the eye. Maybe I finally remembered who I am. He frowned, unsettled. For once, I enjoyed his discomfort. Meanwhile, I continued documenting. Every bank transfer he made toward Lyra's business, every late-night absence, every slip of the tongue. My lawyer called it building the arsenal. I called it preparing for war. The climax of this shift came unexpectedly. Sebastian stumbled home late one night, reeking of whiskey, muttering something about a sponsor pulling out. Lyra had apparently overpromised, and cracks were already forming in their shiny empire. He slumped onto the couch, and in his drunken haze, he said, "You'll never outshine her, Marissa. No one will." I leaned down, close enough for him to smell the calm steel in my voice, and whispered, "Watch me." For the first time in months, he looked afraid. And in that moment I knew, the tide had turned. The shift had been building for weeks, but the final confrontation came on a night that, at first, seemed unremarkable. Sebastian and Lyra had organized a soft launch event for their business, a showcase meant to impress sponsors, family, and friends. My parents were practically glowing with pride, gushing about the power couple they had apparently decided to support. I, however, was no longer the quiet shadow at the edge of the room. I had prepared for this moment, every step calculated. The event was held in a polished downtown space, decorated with glossy banners plastered with Lyra's face. She preened under the spotlight, Sebastian at her side, their hands brushing as they welcomed guests. I stood near the back, my belly prominent now, a visible reminder of what they had tried to erase. When Lyra took the stage to deliver her big speech, I waited. She spoke about ambition, empowerment, about choosing yourself even when others hold you back. The hypocrisy was enough to make me laugh out loud, but I stayed quiet. My moment was coming. Then Sebastian joined her, presenting their vision for the future. That was my cue. I slipped away briefly, handing Zoe, the journalist Evelyn had introduced me to, a small USB drive. On it were the documents I had been collecting for weeks. The lease agreement, the bank transfers from my account, the emails between Sebastian and my mother, the financial projections listing my savings as their capital. Zoe gave me a single nod. She knew what to do. Minutes later, as Lyra beamed beneath the stage lights, the big screen behind her flickered. At first, the audience murmured, thinking it was a technical glitch. Then, instead of her sleek logo, Sebastian's private spreadsheets filled the screen. Line by line, their betrayal unfolded in front of everyone. The emails mocking me, the contracts that tied them together, the siphoning of funds they had planned to use without my knowledge. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sebastian froze, his face draining of color. Lyra stumbled over her words, her polished mask cracking as whispers erupted in the room. I stepped forward, my voice clear and steady. This is the truth, I said, addressing the audience, but my eyes never left Sebastian and Lyra. They built their empire on betrayal, on theft, on lies, and they expected me to disappear quietly. For once, they had no script, no way to twist the narrative. The evidence was undeniable. My parents sat frozen in the front row, my mother's face pale as the audience turned to them, murmuring about their complicity. All their careful posturing crumbled in a single moment. Sebastian finally found his voice. You, he hissed, stepping toward me, his fists clenched. But I didn't flinch. You underestimated me, I replied. You thought I would fade into the background. You thought wrong. Security, alerted by Zoe and the event organizers, stepped in as the crowd erupted with questions and outrage. Sponsors pulled their representatives aside, muttering about breach of trust and fraud. Within hours, Sebastian and Lyra's dream had collapsed into dust. The aftermath was swift and merciless. My lawyer, armed with a mountain of evidence, filed for divorce and financial restitution. Sebastian's attempt to claim my savings was exposed as fraud. Lyra's business lost every sponsor overnight, her reputation shredded by the scandal Zoe's article detailed in brutal clarity. My parents tried to contact me, at first to plead, then to scold, then finally to beg. I ignored their calls. For once, I owed them nothing. In the weeks that followed, I signed the papers that freed me from Sebastian. Lyra vanished from the public eye, her once dazzling brand reduced to whispers of disgrace. Sebastian, stripped of his allies, drifted into obscurity, his arrogance replaced by desperation. And me. I walked into the wellness studio I had been quietly building, sunlight pouring through the windows, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the crisp air of a new beginning. The sign above the door read Phoenix Wellness, because like the bird, I had burned, but I had risen again. Clients began to trickle in, drawn not by flashy promises but by authenticity. Mothers, women recovering from toxic relationships, young people craving a safe space, they filled the studio with laughter, sweat, and resilience. Each day, as I guided them, I felt stronger too. When my daughter was born, I held her close and whispered, they tried to erase us. But we are unbreakable. And for the first time in so long, I believed it. I had lost a husband, a sister, and the illusion of family support. But I had gained something far greater, clarity, strength, and a future that was truly mine. Sebastian and Lyra would always live with the shadow of their downfall. My parents would live with the shame of choosing the wrong side. But my daughter and I, we would live free. Because when they thought they had written the final chapter of my story, I picked up the pen and rewrote it myself.